This video presentation is going to show us how to formulate and execute an optimization problem. Here's a high-level overview of the problem we will be working. The details are available in your course materials and are necessary for you to finish formulating and solving the problem, as well as to follow along in this video. If you do not have a copy of the problem in front of you, pause this video now and resume it once you have the details. Otherwise, you will not be able to understand the numbers being used here. Let's look at how we formulate our problem. All optimization problems have three common elements which you must address. First, you must determine your decision variables. Next, determine your objective function. And the third common element are your constraints. Decision variables are the things we control and need to decide in order to solve our problem. The objective function is what you are trying to optimize, meaning what you're trying to minimize, maximize, or set to a specific value. And constraints are any limitations or restrictions that your problem must satisfy. Looking at decision variables, you control the number of phones sold per sales channel. It is a decision variable because as you change it, your objective function will change as well. Let's look at the objective function. And we're wishing to optimize our profit. As our decision variables change, so will the profit. Next, let's look at our constraints. You have a limited number of resources. And also, you have agreed to sell a certain number of phones through a specific channel. Now, let's get more specific. For your decision variables, you control the number of phones sold at EasyTalk stores, the number of phones sold via mail order, the number of phones to sell at Army distributors, and the number of phones to sell at local department stores. Our specific objective function is that we wish to maximize profit. We have a few constraints, and they are: we must sell a minimum of 150 phones at EasyTalk stores. There are only 600 units produced. Our advertising budget is $5,000, and we only have 1,800 sales hours to use. Now you want to complete this questionnaire. Some of the questions you have already answered. What are you trying to optimize? And that is total profit from sales. What are you trying to decide? And you've already answered that. Our four decision variables are how many phones to sell at EasyTalk stores, via mail order, at Army distributors, and at department stores. How much do each of these variables contribute to your objective? Each sale at an EasyTalk store contributes $70 to the total profit. Each mail order phone contributes $60 to the total profit. Each Army equipment distributor contributes $90 to the total profit. Each local department store contributes $84 to the total profit. How much of each of these resources does each variable consume or take up? Each EasyTalk phone uses $9 in advertising and 3 hours in sales effort. Each mail order phone uses $15 in advertising, but $0 of sales effort. Each Army equipment distributor uses $10 in advertising and 2 hours of sales effort. And each local department store uses $8 in advertising and 3 hours of sales effort. What is stopping you from offering an infinite number of all phones to optimize your problem? We have limited resources in that we only have 600 phones, 5,000 advertising dollars, and 1,800 sales hours. These are our constraints. Are there any special requirements that this decision must satisfy? And the answer to that is yes, we must sell a minimum of 150 units through our EasyTalk stores. This is another constraint. Continuing to formulate our problem, for our decision variables, we will write this out. Let X1 equal the number of phones to sell at EasyTalk stores. Let X2 equal the number of phones to sell via mail order. Let X3 equal the number of phones to sell at Army distributors. Let X4 equal the number of phones to sell at department stores. Our objective function remains the same: maximize total profit from phone sales. Constraints. Total phones available to sell is 600. Phones which must be sold at an EasyTalk location, 150. Total advertising dollars available, 5,000. Total sales hours available, 1,800. To write this formula algebraically, it would look like this. Let 70 of the variable x1 plus 60 x2 plus 90 x3 plus 84 x4 equal our return, which is profit. And how we came up with that formula is it's $70 profit for each phone sold at an EasyTalk store, which is why it's 70x1 plus 60x2, because it's $60 at a mail order and our variable is x2 all the way through. Now that we have all the information we need to set up the problem, let's go to Excel, set the problem up, and then solve the problem. When you go to Excel, you should try to set up the problem to make it easy to read, and you can tell at a glance that you have everything necessary to optimize the problem. I've created a basic template here, and now let's update it based on our questionnaire. The first thing I'm going to do is label my decision variables. And as you notice, I'm going to name them with the variable name as well as the variable itself to make it easy to read. The next 4 rows I'm going to label based on the problem at hand and anything that I will need to formulate an equation. The labels will be total phones sold, profit per phone, advertising costs, and sales hours. Our decision variable is total phones sold. To make it easily stand out for the reviewer of our Excel document, I'm going to highlight them in a different color. Because there are currently no values in the decision variables, and solver cannot work unless there are values in these fields, I'm going to enter the number 1 for each of these sales channels. The next step is to fill in your constant values based on the questionnaire. I know the profit per phone from EasyTalk is $70. The advertising consumes $9, and sales consumes 3 hours. I will now fill in the rest of the known information for this section. I now need to fill in information for constraints. The first thing I'm going to do is label the headers again to align with my sales channels from above. Then I'm going to create rows for each constraint. Now that I've added those rows, I'm going to add 2 additional columns. One is for the resource amount used, and one is for the amount available. On the first row of constraints, I have contract agreement, and only EasyTalk has a constraint. Therefore, I'm going to shade the other cells so I know not to populate them with a formula. Then I have to fill in the amount available for each. For contract agreement, it's 150 phones. For units sold, it's 600. For advertising, it's $5,000. And for sales hours, we have 1,800. Now that we have finished filling out our constant values and we have seeded our variables, we can start to enter the necessary formulas. If you would like a refresher on any of the formulas I'm about to use, you can return to the first section of this course where I've posted several videos specific to formulas. I'm going to start with my objective function, which is total profit. This formula takes the phones sold per sales channel and multiplies it by the profit per phone in that sales channel and then adds those sums for all 4 variables. Here we would use the Excel sum product formula. The next formula will be total units sold, which is the sum of all the phones sold across all channels. This formula will appear in 2 places. Once as a constraint, and then once up top to make it easy to see. Our next step is to fill in the formulas for the constraints. Contract agreement is the total number of phones sold in EasyTalk stores. Therefore, I'm just referencing the decision variable from above. Unit sold is simply the value of the decision variables correlating to the sales channel. To determine how many advertising dollars were used, I'll take the number of phones sold and multiply it by the corresponding advertising dollar amount. Sales hours is going to use the same logic. Total number of phones sold multiplied by the corresponding sales hours. Once I have the formula entered for the EasyTalk sales channel for advertising and sales hours, I can copy that formula for the remaining sales channels. The amount used is a simple formula. It is the sum of each constraint per sales channel. And finally, before I open Solver, I'm going to add another column called Operator. The contract agreement states that EasyTalk must sell a minimum of 150 phones. Therefore, the amount used must be greater than or equal to the amount available. I'm going to enter that in my operator column. Units sold has 600 available. Therefore, I can only sell up to 600, meaning my operator must be less than or equal to. My advertising dollars is limited to 5,000. Therefore, the amount used must be less than or equal to. And sales hours is limited to 1,800. Therefore, the amount used must be less than or equal to. I'm going to put the less than or equal to operator in these 3 cells. Now, we could go in and start guessing if we wanted to. If we have to have 150 EasyTalk phones, it would make logical sense to put the remaining 450 under Army Equipment Distributors because they have the highest profit per phone. That does give us an easy 600 total units sold. However, our advertising dollars are over budget by 850. Rather than guessing and playing with numbers, we will open Solver and let Excel compute the calculations for us. First, we'll click on Data. Then we'll click on Solver. To set objective, we must remember what our objective function is, which is total profit. I will click in the cell that contains the formula for total profit. Next, our objective function is to maximize total profit. And because it's already defaulted to max, I don't need to do anything on the next line. The next thing we're going to fill in is by changing variable cells. These are our decision variables. And because they're highlighted green, it is very easy for me to click and highlight all of them. And now that is properly populated. Now we're going to enter our constraints. Because we're looking at our operators, we can do this very quickly. I will click on Add, and my cell reference for amount used contract agreement I'll look at the operator and update mine to match greater than or equal. And then the constraint is amount available. I will click on add. And then I notice my next three operators are the same. Therefore, I can highlight the cell reference for all the constraints, verify that the operator is less than equal, and then select the amount available, which is the constraint. Now I'll click OK, and I'll notice my constraints are there, greater than or equal, less than or equal for those three. I will click Make Unconstrained Variables Non-Negative. I'll make sure that my solving method is simplex LP, and then I will click on Solve. Excel will do all of the calculations, and I'll have the option to select either 1, 2, or 3 additional reports. I will not select any additional reports for this video. We will look at sensitivity in a different video. I'll then click on OK, and I can check out my optimization answer. As you notice, most of the phones are sold through local department stores. I do have my minimum of 150 sold at EasyTalk, and I have used all of my constraints with the exception of 25 sales hours.